Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, a shooting shatters a moment of peace and healing in the indigenous community. We speak to someone who was at the demonstration protesting the reinstallation of the Juan de Oñate statue in Espanola and dig through some of the cultural context.
We do not allow these acts of violence to perpetuate fear in our communities or to perpetuate cycles of trauma because we come from generations of cycle breakers.
And a special roundtable peers into the problems that have led to major staffing shortages across state and local government. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us. I'm senior producer Lou DeBizio. Last week in Espanola, a 23-year-old man wearing a Make America Great Again hat is accused of shooting Native American activist Jacob Johns during a prayer event where local officials were planning to reinstall a statue of Spanish conquistador and war criminal Juan de Oñate. Ryan David Martinez is charged with first-degree attempted murder, as well as a fourth-degree felony count of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. In just over 15 minutes, New Mexico in Focus correspondent Antonia Gonzalez speaks with two indigenous community leaders about the shooting and the violent history surrounding colonial monuments like the Oñate statue. Then later in the show, a dying pre-18th century Spanish dialect in northern New Mexico is getting some life support thanks to a new project from the National Hispanic Cultural Center. In the second half of today's show, I speak with Center Director Zach Quintero to discuss the Legacy Project and ask how he and his team plan to record and preserve the 400-year-old language. But first, we turn our attention to the public sector. In the host chair for the first time this week, as a New Mexico in Focus correspondent, is journalist Nash Jones. Nash is conducting a special roundtable to talk about why government agencies continue to struggle to hire and retain employees in the wake of the COVID pandemic.
Thanks, Lou. Joining me around the table are Dylan Lang, Acting Director of the State Personnel Office, Casey Padilla, President of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, or AFSCME, Council 18, which covers Colorado and New Mexico, of course, and Sarita Nair, the Secretary of the Department of Workforce Solutions. Welcome all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So, the public sector, both nationally and here in New Mexico, has not recovered from pandemic-driven staffing losses. Dylan, your agency has been tracking this on the statewide level. What exactly are you seeing in terms of vacancy rates? And for folks who don't know, what kinds of jobs are we talking about?
Thank you, Nash. So the State Personnel Office, we are responsible for the administration and oversight of the state personnel classified system, and it consists of about 18,000 state employees with approximately 68 state agencies and boards and commissions. And so if you think about, well, who is a state employee, it's really the gambit of services that are provided by the state. I have a 5-year-old son and a 1.5-year-old son, and they have little community helpers, right? And that's really who our state employees are. They are contractors, they are mechanics, they are attorneys, they are engineers, they're scientists. And so that's really who we're talking about, direct care services in nursing. So that's who we're talking about when we talk about state employees. And new data came out that we do have, 23.8% vacancy rate in the state.
Okay.
And to put that in context, that's kind of right in the middle. It's a little bit higher than we want here at the state, but some states have as less as 10% vacancy rate and others high as 30. So we're kind of right in the middle. There's a lot of causes for the vacancy rate, which I think we can get into. But some of the positions I thought you might ask about where we're seeing the vacancies in the state, and I kind of printed off a couple of jobs that might be meaningful to individuals to understand, with at least 30 positions in the state where there's a higher vacancy rate than 30%. And first is epidemiologists, right? There's a 62% vacancy rate, 24 positions in the state. We're actively trying to fill those jobs and fill those rates, but we did look at the salary, and we are paying more to epidemiologists than the state government survey average. Other states around the country, we were actually paying them $2,000 more.
Okay.
So
epidemiologists are well above the average in terms of the vacancy rate, but on average you're seeing about almost 25% vacancy rate, is that right?
Yeah, in the state, for sure. In
And
the state.
I am interested in beyond the state. Sarita, do you have a sense of what we're seeing in terms of vacancies at the local level, at cities and counties across New Mexico?
Sure, and thanks for having us, Nash. First off, I think for the big picture, what we see right now is a strong economy, but what I think businesses of all types are feeling right now is what we call the estimated employment gap. And that's the difference between the number of people who are unemployed and the current job postings. So right now, there's about a 34,400 person estimated employment gap, which means if everyone who is unemployed and looking for a job got a job tomorrow, there'd still be 34,400 vacancies. So then when we take that down to the government level, government as a whole has basically recovered from the pandemic. So we hit that mark for state government in about June, and now we're up about 1,300 jobs from pre-pandemic. But who's really feeling it is local government. They're still 5,400 jobs short of a full recovery from the pandemic.
And when we're talking local, both city and towns and municipalities, but also at the county level?
Cities, counties, and local schools.
Okay. Well, with that being kind of the scope of the problem that we are looking at tonight, I also want to talk about what's fueling it, right? Casey, AFSCME has launched a national recruitment campaign. Can you talk a bit about what you see as the problem here? I mean, what's the recruitment campaign responding to?
Well, pretty much it's, and I think, it's expanded to just from here, right? It's basically across the nation, right? And that's kind of what AFSCME was doing. They had a bus tour, right, that I think you're part of. And they're going across the nation and they're seeing these vacancy rates and trying to come up with a way of what's going on with it, right? And why aren't people applying? I think Sarita mentioned that even if they all filled, everybody went and got a job, there'd still be a vacancy rate there, right? So we're still trying to just sort through any information we can get to kind of see like what's going on with it, because some of the things that we're seeing now, some of the jobs that people are looking for are more convenience, right? Like working from home. Some of the jobs were able to do that during the pandemic. I think some of the employees enjoyed that as a benefit, right? You have Uber now. You have these different jobs where they can just hit an app and they work the hours they want to when they don't want to, But we're still in the process of,
So convenience being one. Anything else that you're seeing as potentially a big piece of this?
Well, I think it could be. I think, specifically like with the city of Albuquerque, they're doing a class and comp study. Like he stated that some of their pay rates or compensations higher than any other areas. We're kind of working on that same aspect to kind of see if that's an issue also to see where we are competitively, right? So.
Okay. So convenience, pay. Dylan, the State Personnel Office that you direct recently completed a report that touched on some of what's driving these shortages. Can you talk about what was illuminated as important and whether what Casey's talking about is resonating at all with what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we haven't really talked about the recruitment process, but I mean those are some hurdles here. But what Mr. Padilla was talking about, we are seeing that, and State Personnel Office is trying to attack the classification issues that may be hurdles to attract more competitive candidates. So
when you say classifications?
Yeah, just basically what jobs do, the job duties, and how much you can pay individual classifications of employees. So we're going to be doing a classification study on attorneys, right, to make sure that we can pay them competitively. We just did one for forensic scientists at DPS, so we can pay them more at what the market is allowing them to pay. We also did one for HR staff, right? It's some of these harder areas to fill if we allow ourselves the flexibility to offer more competitive salaries. We hope, to attract individuals to come into those positions in the state, and we have seen the state has increased the amount of out of state employees. They're still New Mexicans, out of state employees coming into the state system. So we had more in FY23 than 22. So we are hiring people. It's just we also are creating more and more jobs at positions, I guess, to say, and we just have to get people in those positions now.
Well, and I would just add that the data actually bears both of you out in the sense that State government jobs actually pay more than the average New Mexican wage. They average about $66,000 a year, whereas local government jobs do not. They pay about $51,000 a year on average. So again, you can see that disparity in those numbers as well.
And why is that? And if I might, what would it look like for local government in this particular instance to simply pay people more?
Well, you know, having been at both levels of government, I can say that the local government jobs are frontline in a way that most state jobs are not. So during the pandemic, trash truck drivers couldn't work from home, paramedics, firefighters, cops. There just wasn't that level of flexibility. But also local governments didn't get, except for the city of Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, no local government in the state got direct aid through the CARES Act or through the American Rescue Plan. And so they all had to face really difficult decisions about cutbacks and, you know, falling revenue and all those things without any support. And so I think that's how we ended up where we are here with such a disparity between local and state government pay.
Okay. And you know, I think probably at the state level as well and on the local level, workforces are dealing with an aging workforce, right? So, Sarita, how are retirements impacting this shortage, if at all, and what's speeding those up?
Well, it's interesting. So the 55 to 64 class or age group is actually increasing its labor force participation rate, both men and women. So that's not quite retirement age, that's like right before retirement. Right. But I think what we're seeing is folks who went into early retirement, which a lot of government folks have the opportunity to do, are coming back. They can't make the dollars stretch, or I like to say, you know, their wife said, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here kind of thing. And so I think, you know, we're seeing maybe a ramp up of that retirement age of that population coming back into the labor force.
You mentioned some folks retiring early. Any sense of why that happened?
Well, you top out in your para, and Casey's going to know the numbers better than I do, but I think it's somewhere around 26 years, and so you really don't have that incentive to keep working if you can afford to take your retirement and choose another line of work.
Any sense of whether the pandemic, you know, that was a stressful time for folks to be working, maybe particularly if they were on a short-staffed team, what role that had in losing folks, whether to retirement or leaving to a different position?
I don't know if we really seen an uptake in retirements during the pandemic. The main thing that really affected the people was a lot of overtime in these areas, like the essential, right? That was that they're categorized where they didn't get a lot of this federal grant money, right? In the city, once they're that category of essential, like water authorities, solid waste, and things like that. As things fell short and employees might not have been looking for work, because there was a lot of programs at one point, right, where they're able to stay on unemployment, whatever, for a little while. So they really weren't going out to look for these other jobs, right? So that put a stress on the workforce where these routes have to get picked up. The trash needs to get picked up. Your water needs to be on. I mean, the bus service kept on running. You know, and time away from your family, the more time away, it is a stressful thing, right? So a lot of people were choosing to either leave employment or try to find somewhere else if they could, right? Because it puts a strain on the family at that point.
Oh, sure. Speaking of employee experience of this, right? You know, if we have a sense of the scope of the issue and what some of what's fueling it, as we just discussed, the end result is these hollowed out departments, right? So what are you all hearing about the experience on the ground of public employees? Casey, you just touched on this a little bit, but maybe I can ask you to expand. Yeah. What are you hearing from AFSCME members about what this prolonged staffing shortage has meant for them in terms of their experience at work?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like to them like nothing's happening, right? I mean, I believe that the agencies are active in their hiring process and trying to get people out there, like the job fairs that we've been doing. But when somebody comes in new off the street, they're not lasting, right? I mean, some don't even make it off probation. Some been there a year or two. And with that overtime, like I'm saying, it stresses them out, right? I mean, they have other things they need to do at home, whatever it may be. But they don't stay long enough, right? So, I mean, if it's a 28% vacancy rate, 2 people come in, 3 people leave. You know, 2 more come in, 5 have left. And it's just something that you can't keep up with because of the overtime and, you know, the longer hours that they've had to work. So, I mean, so that's...
Yeah, Dylan, I believe that your department saw that a number of, I think it was only, pardon me, just over 60% of new employees were lasting through their probationary period, which resonates with what Casey's saying. Is there any sense of why that might be, why folks are seeking these jobs, getting these jobs, and then not sticking around?
You know, that is an area of concern, Nash, that we have generally with the state, that we don't have really pinpointed the exact reason for that. We have, implemented exit surveys, so we're trying to find out a little bit more. We know that some employees bounce around to different state agencies, right? And so that would affect the probationary period. Also, what we have been doing is focusing on training, right? To train both an older workforce wanting to come in, what we were talking about, trying to come back after retirement, or a young workforce without experience. And so we have we've focused really on managing skills for managers in our office, but also just basic training on computers, basic training on email. And so, I mean, that's what we were focusing on. But that is an area that we really are trying to focus on, is why probationary period employees are leaving. And just to understand what that is, when you first join state employment, for a 1 year you're a probationary employee. You don't get all of the protections that you would get if you are in the classified service, a classified employee. And so that's what we're talking about with probationary
Right,
employees.
thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, we're talking about folks who just recently started in these positions who are not hanging around. Well, thank you, Dylan, Sarita, Casey, for this conversation. Casey and Dylan and we're going to meet back here at the table in about 15 minutes with a new guest, the Acting Human Resources Director for the City of Albuquerque.
And so we want to also be very mindful of something that Casey talked about earlier, is retaining our staff. So although we have historically deployed some methods of asking our team to work harder by doing some mandatory overtime, we're well in and past the pandemic, and so now's an opportunity for us to really look at how do we more effectively retain our employees and create the consistency of services that our community absolutely needs.
Part 2 of Nash's roundtable discussion is coming up in about 15 minutes. Now we shift our attention to Espanola, where Ryan David Martinez allegedly shot a peaceful demonstrator at the site of the planned reinstallation of a Juan de Oñate statue. New Mexico in Focus correspondent Antonia Gonzalez got a chance to speak with 2 eyewitnesses to ask how the indigenous community is recovering from the traumatic violence, and to give some historical context on what Oñate represents for their people.
Nathana and Janine, welcome to New Mexico in Focus. First, I'd like to acknowledge that the gun violence in itself was traumatizing, and also acknowledge the deep historical trauma that Native people face, but also just how important this discussion is to have. So I want to thank you again for joining us today. And Nathana, you were there. Tell us about the day.
So we were there from the beginning of the day. I was there from the morning, participated in sunrise ceremony that morning, where many folks from the community led us in prayer and led us in song, and also the victim, Jacob Johns, also led us in a song that morning. Participating in the speaking engagements that day, so I stayed to the peripheral, really kind of taking a look for folks' safety and making note of where folks were at. So some of the other opposition folks, or the folks in opposition, also had started to leave. So the group started getting smaller and smaller. There was 2 older men, one with a MAGA hat and another older gentleman, was walking along the sidewalk with the shooter. And also alongside of them, it was them 3, and then one of my friends. My friends was walking alongside with them on the sidewalk, and I knew something wasn't right. The 2 gentlemen were alongside of the wall, the bigger wall, stucco wall, along the sidewalk. And I saw the alleged shooter run or try to charge into the space where we were at, which was near the gravel area. And I just saw him take a right. He ran, he tried to jump the wall, he jumped over the wall. And at that point, everybody started just scuffling with him, trying to get him out of the space. And then that's when they had him up against the wall. He flipped over. got flipped over the wall, and then he stood up, and immediately he picked up his jacket and pulled out his gun. And at that point, I just was like, oh, like I just cussed. I was like, oh, I gotta get out of here. My immediate reaction was to duck, and so I went for cover. I ducked. I came up on the other side of the altar. I stood up, and the first thing that was going through my head was like, where's my partner? Somebody got shot. I heard immediately the cry out for help. I heard the bullet go, the gunshot go off, and I ducked. I went around the corner. I was thinking, like, if this happened, like if he comes around this side, how am I going to protect myself? Where is everybody? And I stood up immediately, and at that point he was already running to his car and had gotten in his car and was driving off. My partner was running to the car. My partner was recording at the time, and so I immediately ran towards the victim, ran towards that area, and then at that point everybody was like calling 911. Everybody called 911, and so I called 911, but my phone wasn't ringing, so I hung up and I tried again, and I called 911, and I got through, and they said that they were on their way. And it was just, everything just happened so quickly. It was just awful. It was definitely something that forever is like a life-altering experience.
Well, I'm glad you're safe, and thank you for sharing that. And Janine, you were also there. What has your life been like since the event?
We switched after Jacob was able to get medical attention, which wasn't until 10-15 minutes later. When the paramedics finally arrived, when he finally was able to get the appropriate medical attention, we switched into having to do our own work to ensure that the witnesses were safe, that we're recording witness statements, that we were collecting information from everybody. We even switched to smudging everyone off because, like I said, this was a prayerful event. And we rely very strongly on our medicines and our traditional ways to protect our people. And so I went around like smudging people, especially the children and the women that were extremely traumatized because this is a family event. And people were like, especially the children, were very traumatized by this type of violence being brought into such a beautiful, prayerful, and loving space. And so since then, we don't have the luxury to rest. We've been having to fight a narrative war that has been trying to frame this as if there was some element of danger in our taking a stand and having this prayerful gathering. When really the danger wasn't coming from us, the danger was coming from these right-wing extremists and agitators who felt compelled enough to come armed with weapons, with guns, with knives, and to heckle and harass the gathering of people that were there. And even though police saw this, and even though they escorted Ryan off at one time prior, they allowed him to come back in. And so this was unacceptable, and having to process those things, having to process the fact that they allowed the rest of the agitators to leave the space before an arrest was made, before interviews were taken, all of that I think has really made it hard to feel safe for any of our organizers and any of the people there, despite Ryan being arrested, because it does need to be investigated who he was in collaboration and relationship with, because this was a premeditated hate crime.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I also want to talk about the historical context. Nathana, what does the Oñate statue mean in particular to you, to Pueblo people, to Okeowinge, which the statue was originally next to your community?
For me, Oñate personally represents the brutality that was put up against our people, right? Our Pueblo people, we fought years and decades to really keep the sort of like dismantling of our communities out of our communities. We really have seen through history just the documentation of how the genocide, the cultural washing, or the banning of traditional practices was done by folks that were brought to really colonize our communities. And so Oñate was sort of like the lead in that piece, along with other folks that came before him. And so it was basically to colonize and to convert Native people. And so a lot of our historical documents really state that there was a lot of destruction, there was a lot of violence, there was greed. A lot of our folks were really pushed to convert, and also a lot of just violence against our women, sexual violence, enslavement of our people. And so now it's really trying to figure out, like, knowing that there's this history that exists in our community, and knowing that that we're all sort of in this community together, is how do we really start to grapple with the way that colonization and the way that these folks came into our community years ago, generations ago, and it still lingers here. But how do we really sort of have these conversations of, yes, we are acknowledging history, and yes, history does tell a story of how this impacted our communities. We still carry that.
Janine, Indian Collective advocates nationally, internationally even. So across the country, when there's opposition to, say, Confederate statues, there's often an acknowledgement about that history, including slavery. So why is it that something like this may not be understood more widely in the public, especially when it comes to Native American history?
The lack of education around the true history of this country and the whitewashing of the education of our general public. Like, we have, like, behind a lot of this right-wing extremism and this white supremacy rhetoric that is rampant throughout our country is this belief that they're the true patriots, they're the true Americans. And it's ironic, because if they really did believe that, you would think they would uphold and understand that the establishment of this country was only enabled through treaties with indigenous peoples. We were never conquered. That's one of those things that those myths of colonial whitewashing of our history that needs to be pushed back upon in every setting. As brutal as these colonizers were, and Oñate represents some of the most brutal crimes of colonization, so much so that the Spanish crown is the one that banished him from this area. They didn't even want anything to do with him. So it's ironic that they want to continue to try to resurrect him as a symbol of what makes them proud to be Americans and New Mexicans even, when even that his reputation is not even accepted or upheld by the country that he was supposedly representing during his conquests. And so, like, when we talk about what we're fighting for and the solutions that indigenous peoples are bringing to the table, those solutions are enabled by upholding our right to sovereignty and self-determination, rights which were never taken away, but that are embedded in the very constitution of this country as the supreme law of the land. And we need all Americans to understand that, and understand that because of that, we were never conquered. That is why we are still here as sovereign nations. That is why our rights are both nation rights and collective rights to both our unique spiritual, political, and economic ways of living and of creating systems of governance and systems of community, and why we will continue to push forward and uphold those rights, because they maintain the pathway for real solutions for sustainable, whole, safe communities. And we won't accept anything less. Because we're not just resisting, we're building solutions in our communities. We're bringing solutions in our communities. That our ability to create and support organizers that have a whole breadth of expertise from laws to economics to policies. We know that we have what is needed to help create and craft solutions that benefit not only indigenous peoples, but all peoples and our Mother Earth. And that is why our fight will never die, and why we will never give up, and why we will continue to persist even in the face of this type of violence, because we do not act out of fear. We do not allow these acts of violence to perpetuate fear in our communities or to perpetuate cycles of trauma, because we come from generations of cycle breakers and of people who have resisted this in all of its brutal forms throughout history to still remain here in our homelands, carrying on these worldviews, our languages, our spiritual and traditional teachings, and we will continue to do so for future generations to come.
Well, thank you for sharing the resilience of Indigenous people and for being here on New Mexico PBS today. Thank you both.
This specific type of dialect has been in existence for New Mexico for the last 400 years. And what we're trying to do with the Legacy Project is make sure that we serve as an audio and digital repository to collect, protect, and preserve this language for the entire state and for the entire country for that matter. And making sure that hundreds of years from now, when folks ask, different kinds of points of language and dialect and history where Spanish was being spoken in North America, they can say New Mexico.
My one-on-one interview with National Hispanic Cultural Center Director Zach Quintero is coming up in about 15 minutes. I also want to thank Antonia Gonzalez for her interview along with both of our guests. You can read a statement from the family of Jacob Johns, the victim in last week's shooting, linked on our social media pages. Now we head back to Nash Jones's roundtable discussion. This time around, the group explores possible solutions to the staffing shortages and hiring difficulties that have plagued the public sector.
Thanks, Lou, and welcome back to Dylan Lang, Acting Director of the State Personnel Office. Casey Padilla, President of AFSCME Council 18, which is across New Mexico and Colorado, and that's the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And welcome to our newest panelist, Patricia Tafoya Harris, the Acting HR Director at the City of Albuquerque.
Thank you for having me.
So now that we have kind of a grasp of the scope of the public employee shortage and how that's affecting government employees, I want to talk a bit about how it's impacting residents, right? So one easy example would be fewer bus drivers in the city of Albuquerque meant reducing bus routes this year. Dylan, can you speak to how those watching tonight are feeling the impact of these shortages?
Sure. Maybe the local government could probably answer that question a little bit better than I. But we do have a vacancy rate. But I think what we were talking about last segment, at the state level, these positions are filled somewhat. We always want them to be higher, and we are seeing that like with some nurses, direct care places, and so we're just asking employees to maybe work a little longer, harder, but we are supporting them with training. But that's what we're seeing at the state level. There are some shortages with correctional officers, but again, we are trying to support and get those positions filled quickly with rapid hires. But I'll defer to.
Yeah, sure. I think that one of the things that we really are trying to be as consistent as possible and having reliable services within all of the services that we provide at the City of Albuquerque. And so in order to be consistent and reliable, we really rely on data to help us with determining how the impact of any change is going to make on our community population. And so we want to also be very mindful of something that Casey talked about earlier, is retaining our staff. So although we have historically deployed some methods of asking our team to work harder by doing some mandatory overtime, we're well in and past the pandemic, and so now's an opportunity for us to really look at how do we more effectively retain our employees and create the consistency of services that our community absolutely needs in order to get to work and to do the things that they rely on.
Yeah, so let's talk about the consistency of services piece. For Albuquerque residents, what does this actually look like on the ground? Right? What is the impact on their everyday life that there are departments at the city that are short-staffed?
Right. So the intent is to utilize the data that we have in order to determine the services that are being most utilized, and we really focus in on maintaining that consistency and reliability of those services. And so what that really looks like to the community members is having our employees really help with maintaining the routes that we have in transit, maintaining the services for animal welfare and for senior affairs, making sure that we're delivering the meals to the sites that are necessary to make sure that our seniors are actually getting the meals that they so need to be healthy. And so it means using that data.
Are there places where that's not consistently able to happen, right?
Well, obviously, yes, Nash, thank you. Obviously, when there are shortages, there may be some gaps in services, but our teams are, and this is where we leverage the ASMEs of the world to help us with making sure that our staff understands that the retention but delivery of these services are so necessary. Sometimes we do deploy methods of asking staff to help with covering those gaps so people are getting the meals or the transit resources that they need in order to get through their day-to-day lives.
Okay. Casey, can you talk a bit about those methods?
Yeah, I mean, utilizing overtime, I mean, the city, they try not to do that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they try to not affect the employee's life, but at some point, right, the service has to get done, right? We have many people that do volunteer, right? Because it's a volunteer first and then they'll force. So they get an opportunity to pick what they want to do. So the services are getting done. I believe like in solid waste, it's getting done. You know, we talk back, lean more to like the transit, the bus part is there's still the service being provided, but it's like a longer time you'd have to wait for that bus. So if the service was 10 minutes, now it's 20 minutes, right? Because the closer in time, you need the more employees, right? You know, in transit, it's a double whammy. You know, it's just not a shortage on drivers. Now it's a shortage on mechanics, right? Because we're short in every area. And who's going to service these buses? Who's going to do these pre-trips? Who's going to put brakes? Who's going to rebuild engines? Who's going to do these things that these buses need, right? So an aspect, I mean, we could have a lot of drivers at one point, and then at another point, we didn't have the buses because they're not being able to get repaired, right? So, I mean, the service is out there. I mean, they're utilizing passenger vans, you know, they're doing whatever they can to, you know, get the people where they need to go. But is there a lapse sometimes? I mean, I'm sure it's possible, right? I mean, I think they work on logging that stuff down and they're working on that data, as Patricia said. But I mean, a lot of that we really don't have yet because this is kind of a new thing, something that we had never experienced. And, you know, coming out of the pandemic, I mean, we're still working a lot of these things, trying to figure these things out, right? So.
Would you say that there are any particular communities that bear the brunt of these shortages? Is it spread across the board? Is it equitable? Or are there some disparities that you're seeing?
Well, I mean, I really don't know what shortages there would be. You know what I mean? I think, you know, like if you have parks, you know, some of the parks, they're put on for another day and maybe the grass won't get cut for a day or two longer, right? Instead of like a regular schedule. So as far as affecting on where it would affect it, I mean, I really couldn't really pinpoint somewhere that it'd be focused.
Well, I'm thinking about buses, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you have a car, you don't have to take the bus, and so you're not going to be affected by that shortage, right? And you know, more often, low-income communities are going to rely on the bus more often. Are there other examples where there are particular communities in the metro area, in this case, where communities are disproportionately impacted by these services?
Yes, I think that's where the data is so incredibly important for us as a city, because we do utilize the data in order to help us to understand the utilization patterns, regardless of what city service that we're providing. And obviously, our biggest commitment is to maintain services across our entire community. But that utilization data specifically helps us with understanding what patterns are being used in the different districts of the city. And we really make an active effort to have as much services as available. That data is critically important to understanding the utilization patterns.
Great. So you've got this data that you're collecting and looking at and trying to adjust to or respond to. I do want to shift the conversation into solutions here. I mean, I think that that's so key if we're going to present the problem itself. So, Patricia, what is the city of Albuquerque up to in terms of responding to this problem?
Yeah, and really what we're talking about is staffing shortages, and that's making sure that we have the robustness of services regardless of what the department is or the position is. And so we have really started a campaign, we're calling it the hiring experience, where we're really evolving our practices within the human resources hiring processes in order to make our programming more efficient. We're taking a look at the qualifications required for jobs. We're looking at our job descriptions. We are looking at just the flow of applicants through our system, and it can be something as simple as a process. I'm very excited to announce that our Transit Department is actually having a hiring event on the 17th and 27th of this month at in our Daytona complex, and that's at 8001 Daytona. The neatest thing about this hiring event is we are literally going to take our applicants through the entire process in one day. So they could literally come in, apply for a job on site, and actually get offered and hired on site for the first time in the city's history. And these are practices that we believe are critically important to really fostering that quick hire process through. A lot of agencies, you're seeing statistics in the 60 plus days in time to hire. Well, we're really trying to drive that time frame down.
Because the longer it takes, you're seeing that folks bail on the process?
Absolutely.
Okay. And when you say that you are adjusting qualifications, adjusting job descriptions, in what way does that support? I mean, how are you adjusting it, and how does that respond to what you're finding is one of the issues?
Yeah, historically the city has had a very attractive applicant pools that come through for positions within the organization. And that has given us an ability through qualifications to have a screening process through that. Well, now when we've seen a reduction in applications through, we really need to make sure that we're identifying all qualified individuals that can effectively perform that job and the skills required in that job. And so we evaluate those qualifications to see, are we actually being too aggressive? So do we need to look at being leveraging experience more than maybe some of the educational requirements that have historically been in some of these jobs? So it's really being mindful of what's going to help us attract a qualified workforce to fill this gap.
And we talked in the last segment about pay being such a significant part of where the public sector struggles to remain competitive with the private sector. Dylan, what is the state doing to boost wages to better attract and retain employees?
I mean, wages is always something that comes up, for employee retention. I mean, but since 2019, the average pay for the state has increased 29%. So, I mean, the legislature and the executive branch, we've had a 6% and a 7% increase in pay for state employees. And so that's just the reality of the last 2 years. There may be another one coming. So we are trying to attack pay in that way, but also flexibility for individual agencies with flexibilities in the state personnel board rules, with temporary salary increases, with retention pay increases, or so we are being flexible in what we can provide with pay, but at a certain point, it just comes down to agency budgets, right? At a certain point, pay can't be the only solution, and so we're looking at a lot of these different retention issues that the city of Albuquerque is dealing with, and we're doing the same things to get outside of just the pay, because I mean, working in state or local government is different than the private sector. You have to buy into the mission, buy into the value that you provide to your community, and so that's where the retention piece comes in. You're not only motivated by pay. It's also compensation, but it's also really the mission, why we're here, public service, and why it's so attractive to a particular type of worker.
And something else that's uniquely different, at least especially here in the state of New Mexico, is state revenue is driven largely by the oil and gas industry, right, which is a boom and bust industry. So what happens when that bust comes in terms of being able to continue to follow through with raising these wages up for state employees?
That's something that we always have to consider, right? Budget will ultimately drive most of these decisions, and so that's why we have these tools available to us at the state level to increase salary, but only temporarily, or have it come into the base salary. But ultimately, I think discussions at a state level, and also goes to the local level, has to be consistent and cooperative with Department of Finance, with the legislature and the executive branch and local governments, to make sure that we are asking the right thing and asking for the right budgets, and not just for positions and not just for anything else. So it's a continued effort every year to understand, hey, how can we make sure that we are providing services, and how does that align with our budget requests? But
yeah, so it's going to continue to be something that you have to respond to as things change. Casey, if I might, the amount of money in somebody's bank account isn't necessarily the only consideration, right, for working for the government. What else makes these jobs appealing as careers?
Well, I kind of like what he stated. You have to have buy-in, right? I mean, at the same time. But I mean, like the city of Albuquerque, and I believe also the state has a great benefit package, right? And I think that's what I myself got me to apply for the city 23 years ago, was the retirement in itself, right? The medical for my family, for my kids, which I have like my grandkids on there now and stuff like that. And I mean, that's really the big part of it, right? And I think that's sometimes what we don't look at. Right, we look at the pay sometimes, which I think we could be more competitive, I think, in some areas. But I mean, it's just that the benefits that we actually, the city of Albuquerque pays 80% of our medical. They pay 75%, a little bit, and some change for our retirement. So those are some of the things where that buy-in actually does come in, where we're offered that, to where we want to hang around and put that career and be there the 25, 26 years that we are.
Thanks, Casey, Patricia, and Dylan for this conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This is something that New Mexico in Focus will continue to cover, as will I at KUNM Radio. Thanks again.
Thanks once again to Nash Jones in their first appearance as a New Mexico in Focus correspondent. We have more information on the low staffing levels in the public sector on our social media pages, including a link to that report from the State Personnel Office. Now this fall, the National Hispanic Cultural Center begins working on a project to preserve a colonial Spanish dialect spoken only in northern New Mexico, a historical language that the center says could die within the next 18 years. The Legacy Project is a 3-year archival endeavor that will send members of the center into northern New Mexico to record and preserve the aging language. Center Director Zach Quintero recently stopped by our studio to discuss the project. Zach Quintero, thanks for joining me here on New Mexico in Focus.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. The National Hispanic Cultural Center is about to begin the first of 3 years working on this Legacy Project. When had the Spanish dialect in northern New Mexico been spoken more commonly, and where exactly?
Sure. So this really builds around Rio Arriba County, starting in northern New Mexico, everywhere from Rio Arriba County to Mora County to Taos County. You saw an article recently in the last 5 months about the village of Cuesta, the town of Cuesta, and how they're specializing in a specific dialect that is traditional Spanish that goes back 200 years. And this specific type of dialect has been in existence for New Mexico for the last 400 years. And what we're trying to do with the Legacy Project is make sure that we serve as an audio and digital repository to collect, protect, and preserve this language for the entire state and for the entire country, for that matter. And making sure that hundreds of years from now, when folks ask, different kinds of points of language and dialect and history where Spanish was being spoken in North America, they can say New Mexico.
Now, what is the cultural significance of the dialect in that area?
The cultural significance is vast, and it starts with not only the story of what built into being New Mexico as it is, alongside our indigenous communities, having shared family members, both Hispanic and indigenous, being able to talk about the larger concept of what really formed what we know now as the United States, and being part of the multicultural piece of what we now understand to be the United States. So it's really powerful on the cultural side to gather this information and collect this specific audio, video, and historic documents. We just received 2 weeks ago, a historic document going from Valencia County to Santa Fe County from 1841. And to date that for you, the Gadsden Purchase, didn't happen until after that. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo didn't happen until after that. The statehood of New Mexico didn't exist until after that. So 1841 is, going back quite far. And being able to house that here at the National Hispanic Cultural Center is really, really special for us.
Now, how did you and the Cultural Center decide on devoting your attention to this specific dialect?
It was a form of 2 parts. The first was the public awareness going around Hispanic communities and being a good conversation with community leaders and folks in different parts of northern, central, and southern rural New Mexico who were sharing that a lot of their language was being lost, that their grandkids couldn't understand a different kind of word that their grandmother was speaking or grandfather was speaking. So first from the community it came to our attention. The second part was the media attention we started to see from the national side about subject matter experts sharing that this dialect, this specific form of Spanish being spoken, was going to be extinct in 18 years. So we saw it as an anthropological time clock. that we had to go on an anthropological rescue mission here to work with our community to protect this language, this history, this spoken dialect, and preserve it. And that's exactly what our mission is at the National Hispanic Cultural Center.
Are there gaps in the language now? And how are you going to work to fill those gaps if there are some?
Sure, there's clear gaps, and that goes back to the state's history. There's been different practices done specifically to the Hispanic community about spoken Spanish. My parents, good example of that. They deliberately tried not to teach me Spanish because of how they were treated in public school, because of how they were treated in private sectors of the economy as well, trying to root out, and the root word that they'd like to use back in the day was assimilation, which is a very derogative term now. They wanted them to forget all parts of their Hispanic identity, or Latina or Latino identity, and make sure that they didn't know any other language but English. So there will be gaps, but what we're going to be able to do is work with different experts in the field that are linguists, first and foremost, starting from the community, that speak this traditional Spanish, that are going to these interviews with us, that are talking with community members, that have trust within the community, that share with them and help us be able to share the full context and story of how this language has developed. We see different dialects from northeast New Mexico to northwest New Mexico, and everything from Castilian Spanish to Basque. And it's really interesting to see that kind of traditional Spanish still being spoken the way it was compared to the rest of the Americas. It's a really special way for us to be able to protect and preserve the full dialect in its entirety.
Sure. Now, are there any words or phrases common in this specific dialect that stand apart from traditional Spanish spoken elsewhere?
So the most common known one, I would say, just from the qualitative pieces that we pulled together, is plebe. So a lot of your viewers will know this word if they're Spanish-speaking viewers in that sense, and New Mexican, in particular Hispanic speaking communities. Plebe is a translation of the word gente, another parallel word of it, right? Which is people, so our people, plebe together. So our plebe, that's my person, that's our people right there. That's one of the traditional words that we've come across both in southern, central, and northern New Mexico. So we see tying trends of certain words being used over and over again. Plebe is one of them.
Who still speaks this dialect? And more specifically, who do you know that wants to speak this dialect still?
So the folks that still speak this dialect are, matriarchs and trusted elders of the Hispanic community, religious communities as well, protected communities that tend to be very private, and we're going to continue to respect that privacy, that have learned this language through religious songs, right? Through traditions during the holidays, through certain prayers, even on Fridays, to Saturdays, to Sundays, to Mondays, certain prayers of the day. They've learned it through their religious background. They've learned it through their community gathering background. They've also learned it through plants, through naming certain things the way they're named, and sharing that and then carrying that over to the traditional language. So,
how are you and your team working to gain trust in these communities where the dialect is spoken so that you can record and archive it, but also respect the people who are currently speaking it?
Well, it helps first and foremost to approach it from a place of humility and respect and understanding, I have an obligation as a New Mexican, as a Hispanic New Mexican, to ensure that I look at this through the eyes that is respecting the people that are speaking it right now. And that is talking with the community first and foremost of who is already speaking it in these communities, understanding the full scope of what kind of activities happen and what involves that language, and then being able to be part of it slowly and being able to share that we want to be able to protect that specific language with them slowly. And that kind of trust takes time, but it's something that I feel that we've been able to gather over the last 6 months in a very powerful way. Our first visit was to families in Mora, New Mexico, in Mora County, in the town of Mora, and being able to talk with certain family members about the form of dialect they use with their family, form of dialect they use in the community. That's a huge first step. And also working with key institution partners like UNM and New Mexico Highlands University, NMSU, Northern New Mexico College, places where people send their kids from New Mexico. New Mexico Hispanic students attend these kids, and they are speaking this language still, but they're going back to their family members and saying, hey, we heard about a project that involves the way that grandpa speaks Spanish or grandma speaks Spanish or the way that dad or mom speaks Spanish, and they connect with us. So it's very natural of what the connection takes place between the community and us, but it's first coming from a place of respect and honoring the language as it's being spoken in that area.
Sure. Now, you talk about a connection with the community. How will these families be able to, who are involved in the project, be able to access this information? Obviously, parts of northern New Mexico, internet isn't as easy to come by as it is down here. Will there be a specific effort to keep these people involved compared to the rest of the general public?
Yes, so we're taking active trips in the field, making sure we stay in close contact with communities that don't have internet accessibility or have direct conversations with us as the National Hispanic Cultural Center. We have remote sites that we're setting up through the Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with some of our university institutions, where we're going to be able to have reoccurring interviews, reoccurring document scanning, so we can be able to show workshop practices to preserve traditional documents. Like I just mentioned, that document from 1841. That was donated to the center, and that was fantastic. And we're really grateful about those kinds of things, but we know more is out there. So we want to be able to show and share fellow Hispanic New Mexicans and different folks that have these documents how to protect their own family history, how to protect those documents so they can hold on to it and pass it on to the next generation. Or if they want to entrust it to us to protect it at the center and they can come see it, we're happy to do that too.
Now, there are several different perspectives from which an organization like yours can approach a situation like this or a project like this. As anthropologists, as historians, as social linguists, are you and the center approaching it from one of those in particular, or is there value in approaching it from all three?
There's value in approaching it from all three. The main one we're approaching it first with is a point of pride and honor for the community, and making sure that we share it from the community's perspective first, and being able to connect with them and share what kind of documents, what kind of story, what kind of language they would like to be able to first just start off the conversation with. And then as that grows, be able to share the anthropological piece behind it, which is who taught you this, right? Where did it come from originally? This town over here speaks different from this town. Why is that? Building that narrative and timeline is the history part after that. And then following straight from that is the sociological component of how did that influence the mapping of language that we have right now in the state? How did it influence the mapping of the United States, for that matter? And what is being spoken now? So.
It's one thing, obviously, to archive and to preserve a language, but there's a clear and major value in that alone. But is there any plan to teach this, to disseminate it to people so that this does become a bit more common?
Sure. So the long-term goal that we have, 3 stages. The first short term is, again, building the community partners, which we're actively doing right now and successfully carrying out, and being able to do interviews and being able to pull together resources from different partners. Second part is being able to display the interim piece of what we pulled together, like those documents, and even another recording that we got from Cuba, New Mexico. We have a series of 15 tapes that we received on a track-to-track player. That's a very old school way of playing audio. And it's traditional Spanish being spoken in Sandoval County in Cuba, New Mexico. It's another precious artifact that now we're entrusted to be able to protect and preserve by Smithsonian standards of care. So that's the midterm part. The long-term piece is with these documents, with that audio, is serve it as a repository here at the National Hispanic Cultural Center so that when people are visiting, whether it be fellow New Mexicans or visitors to New Mexico that may not know a lot about the Hispanic community or want to learn more about Spanish-speaking communities, how it kind of developed, and visit the NHCC and be able to listen to this and make it interactive and be able to map it out and show the history of this and be able to show the words and what they mean and the significance it means culturally. So that people have more education and be able to come from a place of love and respect towards the Hispanic community.
Zach Quintero, thanks so much for joining me here on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you so much for your time.
I want to thank Zach Quintero and the rest of our guests on the show this week for making time to speak with us. And thanks to KUNM's Nash Jones for their work this week as a special guest panel host. And as always, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the viewers like you.